Welcome to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about homesteading stuff and life stuff and everything in between. Join me, Amy Dingman, as we explore big questions on a little farm. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast. Today is Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. This is episode 234. Today we're going to be talking about my farmish take on food rules. And if you know anything about food books, you know that Food Rules is a book that was written by Michael Pollan. Is it Pollan? Pollan? I don't know. Written back in 2009, and I listened to it again on Audible. I do that every once in a while. There was a reason I went back to listening to it, but I have some favorites of his food rules, and I'm going to let you know what those are, talk about them a little bit, give you my farmish take on those to inspire you to get going on that garden or that barn or that little itty-bitty bucket of tomatoes or whatever it is that you want to do to get some better food into your body. So that's what we're talking about today. But before that, what has been happening on the homestead? Well, I'm going to tell you what my Telegram group, the Farmish Kind of Life Telegram group, which you can join if you go to the show notes and find the link for it. I'm going to tell you what, there's a lot of peer pressure going on in that group. If you want to be convinced that you need to start something or do something, you need to go to that group and you need to join it. The other day I was talking about maybe getting some tappers so I could tap my maple trees and my box elder trees, right? And we have Nate and Aaron from Two Chicks Homestead in there, and they were trying to convince me, yes, I need to do this because it's a wee bit early for Minnesota. I think we got a week or two here before the sap's really going to start flowing, or at least that's what the internet told me is the time when the Minnesota sap starts flowing, which has to be when we're getting down below freezing at night. But we're getting up in like the 40s during the day. We're not quite there for like extended amounts of time yet. We're almost there. But anyway, so I'm talking and I'm like, I think I want to do this. I need to go find some tappers and buckets and like all this stuff. And Nate and Aaron were doing their darndest to get me to go to Runnings and buy the stuff and get started and get prepared to do this, right? And then we have Ashley, who is being very practical and saying, Amy, do you really need another project right now? Do you really need to start another thing? So we have some good conversations in there. So all of that to say, we had a great conversation about making maple syrup and watching Nate and Aaron's whole process while they were working on that at their own homestead in Illinois. So if you were looking for some peer pressure and some good discussion about your homesteading ideas and plans and hopes and dreams, that is a place to go. Telegram, find the link in the show notes. But after that, I do have to tell you, I had a romantic date with my husband this past weekend. And romantic dates on the farm are different than they might be elsewhere. Our romantic date was sitting down and making a list of what we need to do for the farm this year in 2023. Because there's been all these ideas tossed around and all these things like, yep, we got to do that. And oh, that's right, we want to do that this year. And oh, we've got to fix that. And oh, we've got to repair that. And oh, that's right, remember that didn't work last time we did it and we wanted to do it a different way. All these conversations, right? And if you remember, last year was kind of a bust on the farm because I went out and got a job. And my husband broke 4 of his ribs. And so last year, there wasn't a lot going on the farm. So we kind of need to rebuild the Farmish Kind of Life, right? We need to rebuild the farm this year, plus add some stuff that we wanted to do last year that we never got to. So we sit down at the dry erase board in the dining room, and we have this big old powwow about what are the things that we need to get done on the farm this year. What's the plan? So making that list and then looking at the calendar and knowing that we live in Minnesota and we have to wait so long until we can start certain things, but then we really have to be on the ball for other things. And what can we do now so we're prepared? And what do we have to wait with? And looking month by month at all those things. It's crazy. I'm going to tell you right now, Ashley, when you said, Amy, you might want to hold up. You might want to consider, do you need another project? Ashley, you were right. I bring this up because number one, it's fun to dream and it's fun to plan, but it's also, you got to have that moment where you're like, okay, how are we going to get this all done? I bring this up because I was asked to speak at a few events this year for 2023, and they were great events, things I really was looking forward to doing. But after having this conversation with my husband and looking at the calendar and having a big old dose of reality staring back at me, I am not going to be able to do those events. And so I have contacted the people that I was talking with about doing these events and said, you know what? 2023 needs to be this year that we get things back on track. This needs to be the year where we are rebuilding the Farmish Kind of Life, because last year was a bust. So, which is a bummer, but it's really funny because you know how I said that my phrase this year was going to be, is this working? I had planned to do these speaking events. I had planned to put some tappers in my trees. I had planned to do all these things above and beyond this list that I hadn't actually written down to like see it in front of my face and then compare it with the calendar, which is always a huge smack in the face, right? All of that to say, that phrase, is this working, was like neon in front of my face. Is this working? Is this going to work? Is this realistic, Amy? You feel it in the pit of your stomach, right? You feel, that's going to be really silly to try and take that all on, even though you're a go-getter, right? Sometimes it's okay to go, I don't know that we're going to be able to do all that. So I don't know who needed to hear that, but I'm saying, make those lists, compare them to the calendar. Yes, it's great to be a go-getter, but you don't want to hurt yourself. You ain't getting no younger. You know what I'm saying? All right, what else is happening? The incubator update. Tonight or tomorrow morning, I'm going to be candling these eggs that have been in our newest homemade incubator. I'm going to be candling them and seeing if there's anything going on in them. I'm very excited to see where we're at with these. So check out my update on social media or wait till next week. I will let you know. What else? The other thing is I said that we were going to be smoking that ham that I mentioned last week. We did not because things came up over the weekend. And so we have decided we're actually going to do that this Friday. The thing with a ham brine is you can leave the pork in the ham brine longer than it needs to be. I'm not saying leave it in there 3-4 months, but if you have to leave it in there longer, it's okay. It's not going to wreck anything. It's better to leave it in longer than not long enough. Do you know what I'm saying? So we have elected, because of things that came up, we're going to put that baby in the smoker on Friday and see what happens. So we can compare the two ham brine recipes and see if there's any difference at all. A reminder for you that if you are interested in subscribing to my snail mail newsletter, The Farmish Papers, this is the month to do it. Any new subscribers in the month of March 2023 will be entered into a drawing to win a full Volume 1 of the Farmish Papers. And since this is only Volume 2 that we're getting into, if you win this giveaway, it will mean that you win a copy of every newsletter issue that you missed up until this point. So March of 2022 up to February of 2023, you will get a copy of each of those issues to add to your collection. So all that information, all those recipes, all those goodies will be yours. So if you want to subscribe, head to my website, farmishkindoflife.com. Look in the menu. You will find the Farmish Papers. Otherwise, just go to the show notes. You'll find a link there too. The last thing before we get to the main topic, I do want to tell you that I was interviewed by Matt from Farm Hop Life. I was on his podcast, which is also on YouTube. I will put the link for that in the show notes. It was my first interview since I took a big old break last June or whenever that was. So it was super fun to get back into that. We had a great conversation, had a lot of laughs in there. So if you want to check that out, go to the show notes. You will find the link. All right. Main topic time, a Farmish take on food rules. And why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about these food rules? I want to get you excited about growing your own food, about raising your own meat. And some of you already have stuff in the ground. I get that. Or you already have stuff started, right? I am currently looking at huge piles of snow all over my farm, and I probably will not be putting anything in the ground until the end of May, middle of June. That's normally when our planting is here. But I want to get us excited. And you may be someone who has grown your own food forever, but sometimes we just want to get excited about it again. So that is what I am here to do. And every time that I read or listen to food rules, I get excited about food, and I get excited about the right kind of food to put into my body and how to eat and all of that. So here we go. Food Rules by Michael Pollan, my favorite rules of his, and a few things that I want to say. Now, this book, I think it was written in 2009. Now, I don't agree with everything he says. I know that I am a much bigger fan of meat than he is, but that doesn't mean that I don't agree with him about a lot of different things. So if you haven't read this book, it's really quick. I think if you get it on Audible as an audiobook, it's like an hour and 20 minutes, so it's super fast. There's 64 rules. Some of them are just a sentence. Some of them he expands on. But I'm going to share 9 of my favorite rules and add my 2 cents to them. So my favorite rule of his, the one that I really like, is his number 2 rule, is the second rule that he talks about in his book, and it is don't eat anything your great-grandmother would not recognize as food. Okay? Don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. And in the book, he's kind of talking about Go-Gurt. I think that's the example that he uses. So Go-Gurt, like that tube of super sugary yogurt, something or other, I don't know. And I think most of us hear this rule about not eating anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. And we think he's talking about food that's been invented or created in a lab or something that you can't make in your own kitchen. And he is, but this rule always makes me think of a couple other things. And these are a couple things I might have already mentioned years ago on the podcast, but we're going to talk about them again because I want to. So there is this book called See You in 100 Years, where the couple in the book, and it's a true story, they try to live like it was 100 years earlier. This was written in 2013, so they were trying to live like it was 1913. And the write-up on it is Logan Ward, that's the writer, Logan Ward and his wife Heather faced a steep learning curve when they abandoned harried, technology-driven lives for a year, not just in the country, but in the country as it was a century ago. So that's kind of the write-up on the book. And what I found so interesting about this book, I love this book, but what I found so interesting was the foods they couldn't eat because they were trying to live like it was 1913. So anything that was invented or got popular or was available after that, they couldn't eat, okay? So they had to live like it was 1913. And it was so interesting to me because it didn't occur to me that there are things I've always known as food or that have always been convenient to me or always available. Those things haven't always been around. It hasn't always been something that you could go to the grocery store and get. So I was thinking about this, and you know how Michael Pollan says, don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. So I think about one of my great-grandmothers. Okay, so my great-grandmother that I had the most time with was my mom's dad's mom, and she was born in 1910. Now, I'm a few weeks away from turning 44, so I started to think about my great-grandma at 44, and what year would that have been? That would have been 1954. So I started to do some research, and I thought, what are some foods that at my age, my great-grandma wouldn't have known as a thing or wouldn't be going to the grocery store to buy because they weren't in the grocery store? What would have been some of those things for her when she was 44 years old in 1954? Okay, so I went to a website called foodtimeline.org. And this is a website that is put on by food historians. If you want to know more about how they came up with the years and how they did the research, you can go check that out for yourself. But basically, it's a list of when certain foods came into, I don't know if you want to say existence, but when they started to be mentioned in publications or cookbooks or when we knew that they were a thing, you know, like a common thing. So in 1954, frozen pizzas, diet soda, and boxed cake mixes had just come into existence. So if my grandma was going to the grocery store in 1954 at my age, those are things she'd be like, wow, these are new. Isn't that kind of crazy? Here are some things that do not exist yet in 1954, when my great-grandma is 44 years old. Frozen pie crust, rice-a-roni, brown rice, because you couldn't get brown rice in the USA at that time. She couldn't get Life cereal at the grocery store because it didn't exist yet. She couldn't get instant mashed potatoes. Great-grandma is 44 years old, and she does not know what high fructose corn syrup is. Grandma doesn't know what turkey bacon is. She doesn't know what a taco salad is. And she doesn't know what zucchini bread is. Can you believe that? That one was a shocker for me. Now imagine if we go back to my great-great-grandma, who was born in the late 1800s, and talk about the food that she would not have known as a thing. We're going to get into this more in another rule that's coming up, but I just wanted to kind of tease it here a little bit. Stick it in your back pocket for a minute till we get to another rule farther down the list, because this will come back and it will make even more of an impact, okay? Another rule of Michael's that I really like is his third rule, which says avoid food products containing ingredients that no ordinary human would keep in the pantry. So when you look at a food label, if you're someone who looks at food labels, and maybe you don't because you're like, I don't even want to know. When you look at a food label, do you have the ingredients to make that food in your kitchen? Are they even ingredients you can put in your pantry? Meaning, are they ingredients that normal Joe Blow or normal plain Jane can buy if they're not a chemist? This is really interesting. Go into your kitchen right now, or when you're in your kitchen, and pick up something in your cabinet or your fridge or whatever, and just look at the ingredient list. Could you make that thing if you had to use ingredients in your kitchen? Is it possible? Another rule of his that I like is his seventh rule, which says avoid food products containing ingredients that a third grader cannot pronounce. You should be able to pronounce your ingredients. This gets a little tricky now because I feel like food companies have caught on to the fact that people want to be able to pronounce their ingredients, and so they've given them different names. They've kind of dressed things up a little bit because they're sneaky like that. But can you pronounce the ingredients that you're eating? Rule number 3 and rule number 7 are kind of related, because I'm guessing if you can't pronounce it, you probably can't buy it as an ingredient and put it in your pantry, right? Another rule of his that I like is rule number 14, which says eat only foods that will eventually rot. Have you ever thought about this? Sometimes I think that his rules are just reframing or restating something that really we already know, but it's just a different way to say it. Eat only foods that will eventually rot. And he does say in his book, well, there's stuff like honey, which will last forever, but okay, except for honey. There are things, if you leave them on your counter for an extended amount of time, they're going to rot, okay? And you're not going to be able to eat them. There are also things that we have in our kitchens that we could leave out on the counter for a very long time, and they wouldn't change that much. They might look a little off, but you actually could still eat them, which is frightening. I know a while back, I think actually a few people have done this, but people who will buy a McDonald's meal and just save it, and then they check it, after a week, after 2 weeks, after a month, after 2 months, 6 months, a year, and they want to see what it looks like. And it doesn't rot as fast as you would think it should. We all know that if the apocalypse comes, we're supposed to eat Twinkies, right? Because they'll be around forever. It's frightening. Another rule, number 21, if it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. That's a pretty good rule. And I think I would also add to that a general, if it eats plants, eat it. That's just a general rule, okay? If it's made somewhere that looks less like a kitchen and more like a laboratory, don't eat it. Rule number 57. If you are not hungry enough to eat an apple, then you're probably not hungry. There are a lot of people who will say, I'm hungry, but I don't know what I want. You open the fridge, You look inside, you open the cabinets, you look inside, you don't see anything you want. You close the fridge, you close the cabinets. 5 minutes later, you're back in the kitchen, you do the same thing. You open the fridge, you open the cabinets, you don't see anything you want. That means you have a craving. It does not mean you're hungry. Hungry means I need to eat because my body is physically telling me I need to eat. And I really don't care if I open the fridge and I find leftover lasagna or tuna salad or a bag of carrots. I'm going to eat whatever I find because I'm hungry. Now, that doesn't mean you're starving. It doesn't mean you're ready to pass out. The sad thing is a lot of people nowadays don't know what their hunger cues are. Do you know how you know you're hungry and not just bored? You should know that about yourself. Does your belly start growling? Do you get lightheaded? Do you get shaky? And not that you should always feel like that before you eat. I'm just saying a lot of people say, oh, I'm so hungry. And they're not hungry at all. They're not hungry at all. They have a craving. If you go to the kitchen and you're like, I don't really see anything I want to eat, you're probably not in the kitchen because you're hungry. You're in the kitchen because you're like, it's about 15 minutes till lunchtime, so I should probably find something to eat, I guess. You're probably not hungry if that's what you're doing. If you're not hungry enough to eat an apple, you're probably not hungry. All right, next rule. Number 70, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. And I love this rule because I'm usually the most hungry somewhere between breakfast and lunch. That's when I'm the most hungry, okay? And I used to think there was something wrong with that because I grew up with breakfast is just this little something, just this little meal, right? And then you have lunch at school, which is kind of a little meal. And then you get home and you eat with your family and it's this big dinner because we're all together and you can gather as a family and you finally got time to sit and eat and enjoy your meal. So that is your big meal. But it's also a little bit weird that we eat our biggest meal of the day at the end of the day. We eat our biggest meal of the day a couple hours or a few hours before we're going to go to sleep. Does that make sense? Like, why are we not eating our biggest meal to fuel us for the day when we're going out to do all the things? Why are we eating our biggest meal when our body's in shutdown mode and we're like, okay, it's time to relax, time to sit down and read. I don't know what all that food in my body's going to do right now, but that's cool because I'm just hanging out and getting sleepy. Isn't that kind of backwards? And I understand why we eat like that because like I just said, it's like you get up in the morning, oh my gosh, I got to get to school. I got to get to work. I got to get all these places, rush. I don't have time to eat. So we have those little meals, right? It's kind of backwards. But I was glad to hear that rule because it made me think, well, maybe I'm not totally crazy from being completely backwards in my hunger or my cravings or whatever. Like it's in the front part of the day, not the end of the day. By the time dinner rolls around, I really don't want a giant meal. Or maybe that's just because I'm not a teenager anymore. I don't know. All right, next rule. The next one that I really like is rule number 79, which is treat treats as treats. Okay? Now, I post a lot of really great recipes like carrot pie and carrot cake and ice cream caramel rolls and Amish flop bread and I do all the baking, right? So sometimes people will say, Amy, now you're going to tell us that we can't eat any treats because like you post all these amazing recipes. What am I supposed to do with that? Now, here's the thing. We all have amazing recipes from back in the day, right? Amazing recipes from our grandmas and our great-grandmas, our grandpas, our great-grandpas, whoever was the amazing cook back in the day, right? We have these recipes that were passed down and they're so great. Great pies and cakes and cookies and all this stuff, right? Your grandma and your great-grandma and whoever else was doing the baking and the cooking, they were not making those treats all the time. They were treats. Okay? That's one part of it. If they were making those things all the time, if you had a grandma who was making pie every lunch and every supper, it's generally because the people in your family were working their tails off and they never sat down except to eat that pie, which was with their lunch or their supper or whatever. And then they were back up doing all the things. And their body was like, give me more food. That pie was great, but now it's already gone. I think today we don't understand what a treat is. Treats are everywhere now, and we have them all the time. Everything is a treat. Michael Pollan says somewhere in his book, if you had to make all the snacks and all the treats that you eat, you wouldn't eat nearly as many snacks or treats. So yeah, maybe grandma was making a pie every day. She probably wasn't, but if she was, she also was not stopping at the gas station every day for a Pepsi and a bag of chips. Or fancy coffee. Or she wasn't grabbing a bag of frozen French fries to go with the burgers she was making. It is such a pain in the butt to make French fries, you guys. The reason people started making French fries all the time is because they were ready to go. You grabbed them out of the freezer and you fried them up, right? You didn't have to cut them. You didn't have to peel the potatoes. You didn't have to do any of that, right? That's why we don't make homemade French fries all the time. That's why we don't make fried chicken dinners all the time. Fried chicken dinners became a lot more common when you could just grab a box of banquet chicken and pop it in the oven. And in 45 minutes, you had your chicken dinner, whatever it is. I love fried chicken dinners. I have people who are like, when are you going to do a fried chicken dinner again? Because it's so delicious. But I don't make it very often because, you guys, a fried chicken dinner is so much work. And the cleanup really sucks. So I don't make them all the time. But when you can just go to the store and grab a box of banquet chicken and have it whenever you want, you eat it way more often. Do you see what I'm saying? If you had to make all the chips you eat, if you had to make all the little pretzels you eat, I don't even know how you make pretzels that you buy in the store, like a bag of pretzels. I don't know how you make those. If you had to make those, if you had to make all the ice cream you ate, if you had to make all the donuts you eat, you wouldn't eat them as much. That has totally changed about our eating. Everything is so convenient and so available now, we don't even think about it. That's a huge difference from how our great-grandmas were eating, or great-great-grandmas, whoever you want to put in that spot to represent long ago eating, okay? And this doesn't even have to be like the obvious unhealthy things. I'm talking about like everything. There are lots of things we eat now because they are easy to grab. And if we had to make them like our grandmas did, we wouldn't eat them as much. If you're still someone who eats bread, if you had to make all the bread you ate, you would not eat as much bread. I guarantee it. If you had to make your own peanut butter and your own jelly and your own bread, would you make as many peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as you do? Peanut butter and jelly became like a convenience food of sorts because it is so easy to slap some peanut butter and jelly on some white bread and go about your day. If you couldn't just go to the store and buy the peanut butter and buy the jelly and that loaf of bread, would you be eating peanut butter and jelly as often? Probably not. And as long as I'm on the peanut butter thing here, here's a side note about peanut butter. So I get in this whole thing about food rules from Michael Pollan. There's a couple other books that I was reading, and I start looking at how there's added sugar in everything. Okay, and like we know that, but it's every so often you just watch the right TED Talk and you see the right article and you talk to the right person. Then you're like, it's right there in your head again. You're like, there's like added sugar and stuff that we don't even realize there's added sugar in. And so I'm looking for peanut butter the other day, and I'm like, I'm going to specifically look to see how hard it is to find peanut butter, because I was having a peanut butter craving. How hard is it to find peanut butter that is just peanut butter, like there's no added sugar in it? And so, of course, you go to the natural section because natural peanut butter, that shouldn't have any sugar in it. Y'all, do not assume that because it says natural that they have not added sugar to it. I cannot tell you how many jars of peanut butter I had to put back because I was like, dude, sugar is the second ingredient on this natural peanut butter. What the heck? I did finally find some peanut butter. I think it's Justin's peanut butter. And it's just peanuts and oil, I think. Some palm oil or something. I don't know. That was the most natural that I could find. And y'all, it doesn't taste anything like the peanut butter that most of us know as peanut butter. But after a few days of eating that, your taste buds are like, yeah, this is great. This is great peanut butter. And I don't know what you do if you go back to natural peanut butter with hidden added sugar in it. Like, you're like, what is this, candy? I need some chocolate to go with this because it tastes like a jar full of candy. It's crazy, y'all. All right, that's my little rant, I guess, for this episode. So if we go back to the concept that my great-grandma or my great-great-grandma, they couldn't just go to the store and buy whatever, because maybe it didn't exist, or it's something they have to make themselves. They're not purchasing it as a product. It's maybe not even something that exists yet. Does it become clearer how different it is that we are eating now? Food is completely different. What's available to us is completely different. What's convenient to us is completely different. What exists is completely different. So much food is more convenient now and more available now. We just grab it off the shelf. We don't even think about it. And the vast majority of that food has added sugar now. Foods you don't even consider have added sugar in them have sugar in them. Sugar that wasn't even in the product before. Like if it was a product that your grandma or your great-grandma or your great-great-grandma was buying, there was no sugar in it. They didn't add sugar to it. They're like, why would this need sugar? It hasn't now. It's crazy how much food has changed. The last rule that I want to bring up from food rules is rule number 83, and that is break the rules once in a while. And I want to point out here that I think this rule says it's not all or nothing. Okay? Don't be such a slave to the rules that you stop enjoying food. Because food is fuel for your body, but it's also a celebration, right? There's a joy that we get from eating, from sharing a meal from someone, and don't give that up, okay? I hung out with my mom and grandma this weekend. We got together, we watched old family movies, and I ended up spending the night there. And we woke up in the morning, and there were cake donuts and jelly-filled donuts from a gas station bakery in the morning while we ate our coffee. And I enjoyed that cake donut. I'm not going to lie. I had puff corn and generic chicken in a biscuit crackers while we were sitting there talking and laughing the night before while we watched our movies. It's not that I don't ever eat that food. I still eat that food sometimes. Stop stressing out about it. Because here's what I think. My gut feeling is that us stressing out about what we're putting in our body, I think it changes how our body uses that food. And I don't know if there's any science behind that. I don't really care. It's just what I've always thought. When we get really, really stressed out about, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to eat this, or oh, I ate too much of this, or when we stress out about it, we take the joy out of the meal. We take the joy out of nourishing our body. And I think that changes something about the food in our body, something about how we use that food. Maybe that's a little woo-woo. I don't know, but that's just what I think. I think we need to understand what food is. I think we need to understand the difference between actual food and then just food. Do you know what I'm saying? As much as you can, as often as you can, make the better food choice, okay? Eat from your garden. Eat from your barn, or eat from someone else's garden or barn. I mean, ask them first. Don't just go into their garden or their barn and steal stuff. Support other people who are growing good food, okay? I don't even care if you go to the grocery store and you shop in the produce section. Whatever it is that you need to do to get decent food, okay? Eat decent food the majority of the time. Stick some yummy homemade treats in there. Food is fuel for your body. But it's also a celebration, and you have to figure out what that all means for you, okay? But we have to understand what's in our food, what's going on with the food, and take control of what you can. Another book that I was reading that was suggested by someone in the Telegram group, another plug for the Telegram group, was a book, Eat, Move, Sleep, by Tom Rath, I believe. And a quote that I pulled out of there that really spoke to me was this: 100 years ago, many people died from infectious diseases because they had no cure. But today, a majority of people die from preventable conditions. And I read that quote and I was like, ooh, yeah. It's crazy to think that many, many, many years ago, people were dying from these diseases because there was no cure. And things would happen and there was nothing they could do about it. And yet, so many people now are dealing with sicknesses, illnesses that come from things that in some way they can take control of or responsibility for. And I hope I'm not offending anyone by saying that. I know we all are in different places. And if that is not your story, please don't come at me. But y'all know if you feel like crap and you continue to put crap in your body and you have the option not to, you got a choice to make there. That's all I'm saying. Again, this is not an all or nothing thing. I think we should enjoy eating. But I also think we should understand what we are putting into our body. So there you've got it. There's the food rules, my commentary on the food rules. And I'm just realizing now that in the intro, I said there were 64 rules, I believe. And then when I was doing my countdown, I was up to like 83. I'm wondering if there was 2 different versions of this book put out. I'm guessing maybe there's an updated version because I was kind of working off of 2 different things here. Sorry, I should have proofed this better. Now you know what real life is like when Amy's trying to record a podcast episode and decides she's not going to edit it out. So there you go. Those rules might not line up with the version that you're reading, but there you have it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you have anything you want to add or discuss about these food rules, my email is always open. You can find me at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. You can find me on various social medias as well. I would love to hear from you. If you haven't joined the Farmish Kind of Life Telegram group, you should go do that. We have lots of great conversations in there. Link is in the show notes. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Once again, you could be listening to anybody talk about anything right now, but you choose to listen to me, and I appreciate that. I hope you have an awesome, awesome day, an awesome, awesome week, and I will talk to you again soon. Hope you enjoyed the show today. To continue the conversation, visit our website at afarmishkindoflife.com. Find A Farmish Kind of Life on social media or drop me an email at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Peace, love, and bacon, y'all. Stay farmish. Stay farmish. Stay farmish. Stay farmish.